everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marketing Mondays with Maria. I am Maria, the host and also the founding marketer at Magier. And today I'm joined by Oskar Eklind, who is a marketer turned productivity expert and also a fellow Notion ambassador based in Stockholm. We met last year and I was super amazed by his perspective on productivity, focus, and dealing with stuff like overworking, overwhelm. Oskar also has a fantastic personal brand on LinkedIn, and even though his posts are all in Swedish, I make sure to hit that translate button every time, and I learn something new also every time about productivity. So today we're going to talk about productivity for marketers specifically, and how you can approach tackling the never-ending list of things that you probably need to tackle or want to tackle. Oskar, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Makes me feel warm by heart.
To start off, what is your story with productivity?
I used to be this in-house manager at Storytel. Storytel is a Swedish audiobook company. So I was the in-house manager there for our production team. And I was struggling with a lot of things that marketeers usually struggle with. An endless to-do list, endless of meetings, multitasking, 20 priorities, but 0 real priorities. So, but back in 2019, in the summer of 2019, I got sick. I got bitten by this small tick. There's a lot of ticks in Sweden. So I ended up sick with meningitis. So I had like super high fever for a couple of months, explosive headache, and spent some time at the hospital. So that was like my breaking point, because when I got back to work, tried to get back to work, I was left with this feeling of like, I don't have the same amount of energy anymore. And the doctor said I had some brain fatigue. So for the last 5 years, close to 6 years, I've been working with that, with my own brain fatigue, trying to find methods to become productive for real and to being able to do my job again. So that's been my journey for the since 2019. Mm-hmm.
Is that also partially the reason why you moved away from marketing and decided to do your own thing with productivity?
Yeah, probably you can say that, but it started out like this personal journey, like finding methods and ways of thinking for myself to being able to do my work at Storytel and later on as an solopreneur within marketing. But in the last probably 18 months, I've been only doing this productivity thing. I realized that these methods and these ways of thinking that I've been working with for the last 5-6 years, I would have needed them before I got sick. Like before, when I was a regular marketeer in 2018, that's the time when I would have needed them the most.
Well, I really cannot wait for you to share all of your productivity tactics with me, because as a marketer also, I felt what you said with having 20 things that are urgent burning. And then when you question it and it's like nothing is actually burning, you really have to learn to decide what to do and then take it one step at a time, like you always tell me as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about when you were working in marketing. What did your days look like? What were your challenges?
As a manager, my main goal was to like gatekeep my other employees. So they were able to do their job. Because we did a lot of video production and social media production. And there's a lot of people inside the company that wanted my employees like focus and energy and attention. So my main job was being a gatekeeper, trying to make them do their job in their best way, and also being a creative, like writing scripts and building pitches and stuff like that. But there was a lot of projects, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of meetings, and I had a real struggle with finding time for myself and my own focus, like doing this most important thing. I always did multiple things at once, and the most important things, they ended up being done like right before the deadline.
I can relate to that as well. So I've never managed like a big team or anything, but I can only imagine it's so hard to find time for your own actual work when you have so many people waiting for you to reply, to give feedback, to gatekeep their energy. I really can totally imagine how challenging that must have been. And nowadays, now that you're doing productivity consultancy, productivity workshops.
I call myself a productivity personal trainer, a personal trainer within productivity.
Okay, personal training within productivity. Who are your like typical clients right now, or typical people who reach out?
I mostly work with one-on-ones. They can be solopreneurs, but also employees at the marketing team, but mostly marketers in a scale, and some marketing teams as well. Like we're doing this one-on-one thing, but with the whole team. So that's my main like niche, working with marketeers, because I know their story, I know their reality. I've been there myself. So I try to teach and I try to help them with my own experience, counting back to my marketing times.
These marketeers, when do they reach out to you? Like what kind of mental state are they in? And what makes them reach out to you to ask for your service?
I would say there are two different type of person in my case. Like the one of them are like they're on top of things. They like structure, they like organizing things, but they want to become better. Okay, they've seen the potential in structure and focus, but they want to become better. That's one part, and the other parts are usually like, my life at work is chaos. Can you help me like figure something out? So there's basically like these two extremes usually with the people I work with.
And what are some like common reasons for procrastination, or common reasons why life is not working out for them that they have mentioned?
Like being constantly distracted is, of course, one main issue. They can be their own distractions like social media and procrastination, but it can also be distractions from their team. Like they're working in an open space environment, where people are talking all the time. They have meetings they have meetings beside you. They're knocking on your shoulder like, hey, can you help me out with this? But also if you're working remotely, you have this like constant distractions with meetings and Slack notifications, stuff like that. So that's usually the first part that we're looking into, like how much time and energy do you spend focused with one thing at a time? We used to call it like the deep work session, or these focus sessions. Like how can we implement them in your day? That's usually the starting point.
It's super interesting. Someone reaches out to you and tells you, okay, they're overwhelmed, they don't know how to continue. And then the first thing you do is ask them, do you even have like focus times, focus blocks? Okay, what is the second step? I would love to understand a bit the process of how you approach new clients as well.
Yeah, and also it depends if the person is an employee or a solopreneur.
Okay.
If he is a solopreneur, they maybe take a broader approach, like what's your main goals and vision about your company and with your life and stuff like that. We go a bit deeper, and then we try to prioritize their weeks and days, like having that in mind. But usually just looking at the person's schedule and looking at the to-do list usually tells a lot about their situations. Because sometimes they don't use their schedule in a good way. They don't schedule things at all. But most of the times their schedule are full with meetings, and their to-do list are just a long list with things that you can't really realize and understand what they mean. So like taking those two, the calendar, the schedule, and the to-do list, like trying to make sense together of, okay, what do I need to do? What are my prioritized projects? And what task do I need to do in that project? And when do I gonna do them?
Adding a time, a date to every single task that you have, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about like time boxing, this method, where you take your to-do list, what you're gonna do, and you take your schedule, when you're gonna do it. So just take... My biggest and best productivity hack is probably to take, okay, what am I going to do and when am I going to do it? So just take what and when and combine the two. That's a really good start of like being more productive in that sense.
I love this tactic as well. I try to follow it, but I feel like one of my struggles sometimes is that I move things around still. Maybe you have a tip for people like me.
Yeah, but first of all, like the main goal is not to complete everything, to do 100% exactly perfect every time. That's not the main goal. The main goal is to keep going. Even though you fall off or even though you miss something, the main goal is to get back to it and like, okay, I'm still on track. But when it comes to moving things around in your calendar, then you probably should stop and say to yourself, like, why am I moving this around? Is it even a priority? Can I just skip it? What happens if I just delete this thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Since I have been moving it around, pushing it forward for 3 weeks, how important can it be? And maybe it's something that's important but not urgent. Okay, is this really important for me and my team? Then I really have to make time for it. I just can't keep pushing it forward because then it will never happen. So, like, ask yourself those questions. Is this important? What's going to happen if I just delete it? And okay, yes, it is important. I want to do it. I need to do it. When am I going to do it? You have to cancel something. You can't do everything. The to-do list will never stop. It's an endless list. So you have to prioritize. Also, if it's like this task that you've been putting forward a long time, if you realize I want to do this, I need to do it, it's something important. Why am I procrastinating? It's usually because that task is way too big or way too scary or way too difficult or way too unclear. So if that's the case, you need to break it down. You need to make it as easy as possible to get started. So I usually take this example by, you had this guy that I work with that had this thing on his to-do list for 2 weeks, like create a new presentation. That was like his to-do. Create a new presentation. And he's been pushing this forward for 2 weeks. And I was like, why do you think you're doing this? Why haven't you done it yet? Yes, because it's terrifying. I don't know how to make a new presentation. Exactly. So let's break that down. That makes the first step like maybe research for my previous presentations or discuss with my colleague about this topic or read a certain article about this topic, whatever. Like break that task down. Because that's a project, that's not a task. Creating a new presentation is a project with a lot of tasks. Yeah. Make it easy, make it small, so you can make some progress. And suddenly you have made a new presentation.
Yeah, I love this idea of seeing some tasks that are like bigger, that typically some people see as tasks, but they're actually projects. So like seeing tasks that are bigger as projects and then breaking down into subtasks.
It depends on how difficult you think it is. Like how difficult is it for Maria to do this? I write my newsletter every week. So from now, it's kind of easy for me to write a newsletter. So on my to-do list on Fridays, I can have like, write a new newsletter. That's okay, because I've done it 50 times. But if it was my first time, I really need to break it down. If it's scary for you, difficult, break it down.
Why do some people tend to procrastinate more than others? And maybe are there any patterns that you noticed?
First of all, I would say it's not strange or weird that we procrastinate. All of us do it. Like in some sense, we do it every day, probably, but it's not strange. It's not weird because our brains are made to keep us safe and alive. And if we have this big task that is scary or difficult or whatever, then our brain is like, no, don't do this. Don't do this. It's scary. It's difficult. It's boring. Don't do it. Stay alive. Of course, we're going to procrastinate. First of all, I think you can work with it. You can become better at not procrastinating. But still have in mind that sometimes you're going to procrastinate. That's okay. The main goal is to like win more often than you lose. Besides breaking it down, making it easy, making it approachable. That's one tip of breaking your procrastination. The second is like start it for 5 minutes. Okay, this task is dreadful. I don't want to do it. But if I tell myself, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, if I don't want to do it anymore, I can just stop. That's okay. Because then usually you will get in some kind of flow. You get some kind of progress that after 5 minutes, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this now. I'm ready. I'm into it. And if not, then it's just to leave it and do something else. At least you tried. You need to stay true to yourself. If you say, I'm going to do it for 5 minutes, then it's okay to stop if you won't feel like it. We need to see some progress to stay motivated in that sense. And if the task is too big, then it's really difficult to see that you're getting somewhere. Break it down, make it easy, start for 5 minutes. Can you give me an example of like a project that you're putting forward?
I'll give you a very marketer typical example. I have one project basically where I need to go through all of our blog posts in our blog, which is like 90 blog posts. And I need to go check every one of them and see if we can improve them, if I can update any information that is outdated, and if they align with our tone of voice, if I need to delete some blog posts as well. But it's like, it's a big project, right? Like 90 blog posts. I broke it down into blog post, like one task is one blog post, but it still feels like a long thing to do.
Do you have a deadline?
No. I mean, I should ideally do it as soon as possible. That's my deadline.
A deadline from your boss or from Maria?
From Maria.
Okay. So there's no urgency here, really. Is it any urgency? Do we need to do this in a set amount of time?
No.
Is this important?
Yes.
Okay, why?
Because if I don't update the blog post, our traffic will continue to drop. And then if to mitigate that, I need to update the blog post so that it rises again.
That's good. We want important projects that are not urgent. That's like the perfect spot. That's the most difficult spot because there's no urgency, but that's important work. So my suggestion is 90 blog posts, that's a lot. But even like one maybe is too big. So break it down like one blog post doing this thing if I need to add or tweak something. Like that's one step. Or maybe the first question should be, do I need to delete this blog post because it's not good? Like break that single blog post into smaller tasks. And also I know you're good with tools. You could use AI a lot for this. At least the first steps, like, is this good enough? Or give me suggestions for improvement on this blog post. Like you can do those 90 in half a day, probably just using AI. That's like the first step. And then you're going to do your own work. Use your tools to make it easier. If it's important for you and you've been putting it forward for a long time, okay, how can I make this a bit more easy? Break that down, break those 90 into one blog post and one step. And then another step for the same blog post. And also, I think you should write down, why do you want to do this project? It's important because it's important for our traffic. And our traffic is important for our business. And our business is important for me as Maria, and so on and so on. Like, make it clear why, because obviously it's important for you and your team. But going back to methods for breaking your procrastination, there's this: if you have a task or a project in this case that you don't want to do, like it's dreadful, it's like boring or whatever, then you should imagine how it would end up. Like, what's the worst case scenario if I wouldn't do this? Oh, it's really bad for our traffic, and so on. If there's something that you want to do, but you still procrastinate, and then you should visualize the other way around. Okay, what's going to happen if I do this? What's the good part of doing this? But this seems like a project you really don't want to do. Then you should visualize the negative side of not doing. For me, myself, having like an example for me is like reaching out to potential clients. It's dreadful for me. I think it's scary. It's blah, 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 blah. What happens if I don't do it? Maybe I won't have a business. What happens if I don't have a business? I won't be able to support my family. What happens then? I need to move from my house. What happens then? And blah, 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 blah. You know, you can break it down as long as you want to, but usually it doesn't take that many steps.
It's a bit of like fear, a good amount of fear to make
Fear can be a good motivator for yourself. Totally.
Would you say there is like a maximum amount of hours a person like can work in a focused way per day?
There's some different numbers here. Usually we talk about 2 or 3 or 4 hours. But of course, someone can do it for 8 hours, but probably not every day. So if you have like 0 hours of deep work focused time right now, because all you're doing is meeting or so Slack or multitasking, whatever. If you have 0 hours right now, let's start with 1 hour tomorrow or 1 hour next week every day. And then get back to 2, step up to 3. And if you're able to do 2 hours of focused work every day, working in a marketing team, you're probably in the top 1%. So don't make it too big. Don't make it doable also. Like you've been able to make it work. And also, if you schedule focus time, deep work, if you schedule 2 hours, don't think that you're going to do focused work for 2 hours straight. You need to work in intervals. Probably heard about Pomodoro method or something like that. But work in intervals, take breaks, and use that 2 hours, but not like every 120 minutes of it. Plan and do something that you are able to finish and like succeed with. That's also good for your motivation.
During these like 2 hours of focus time, what are your tactics that you use to not get distracted, not do the laundry on the side?
First of all, like, when do I do this focus time? You have to think about your own energy. So me having brain fatigue, my energy is like the amount is way lower before 2019, but I still have a lot of energy sometimes during the day. So I need to schedule this focus time when I have the most amount of energy. That's step one. And step two, like what am I supposed to do? That comes back to making it clear, making it doable. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's doable. It's not like solve 90 blog posts. It's like taking one step at a time. And then try to create your own focus routine. And first step of that is absolutely minimizing your distractions. Like in the most amount possible, like 0 distractions if possible. So if you're on iPhone or Mac, focus mode is a perfect tool built into your Mac, built into your iPhone, where you can build your own like airplane mode. So I have an focus mode for my deep work sessions, where the only number that get through is my daughter's preschool. Like my fiance, my mom, my clients, they won't get through when they call me or they text me because they're blocked by my focus mode. But if my daughter's preschool calls me because I need to pick her up, that will come through. So focus mode on iOS or Mac. And also use focus music, because it's usually really hard to find a silent place, especially if you're working in an office. So use focus music. I use lo-fi beats with Lo-Fi Girl. She's amazing. And also like Endel, or even I know that Headspace now has focus music and binaural beats and stuff like that. Try to find something that works for you and use that thing. For me, it's Endel. Use that thing every time because it helps your brain like, okay, now it's time for focus.
One of the things I also notice, and one of my next questions is also that sometimes I feel like my brain just feels a bit understimulated. Like when you're doing something monotonous, like a monotonous task, like updating a spreadsheet. And in marketing, quite a popular task, I would say. Like updating something or doing something you already know how to do on autopilot, more or less. That's when I tend to multitask or also like reach for distractions or turn on like a TV series in the background, which is like the worst thing probably you can do for your productivity. I found, for example, for myself that when I listen to music or something, it keeps my brain stimulated enough, especially with like something like techno. I never used to listen to techno. It's crazy. I used to think it's not for me. And then I tried listening to it while working. And I was like, wow, I have so much energy. My brain is occupied. I feel perfectly focused. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, that's nice. And also like updating this spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Is that important work that needs my full attention and my full energy? Probably not. Maybe it's urgent and it needs to be done, but it doesn't demand anything from Maria.
Yeah.
It just needs to be done. So I wouldn't schedule those kind of tasks for your focus sessions, because then you're going to waste your focus and your energy and your time on these tasks that are like, I can do this in my sleep. Use these scheduled times for like more important work that are also like hard and demand something of Maria. Like, okay, this is my biggest, most important work, is like writing a script or writing an important email for a client or whatever it is. I think it's totally fine to like have some boring task, like updating a spreadsheet and making a bit more fun to do, like watching a series at the same time. You can do that when it's those kind of tasks. Don't do that when it's time for like writing something important.
Yeah. What are some qualities of marketing teams that get shit done?
Good question, though. I would say like the first is probably clarity. Comes down to priorities. Mm-hmm. What is an important project and what is not? And what's the main goal here for me and my team and our company? Creating some kind of clarity. Mm-hmm. And also having respect for each other's time and energy. If your prime time is between 9 and 11 a.m. in the morning, if I know that, that's really stupid of me, like scheduling a meeting with you at 9 a.m. because that's the time when you're going to do your most important work. So talk about those things. I usually call them team agreements. How can we create team agreements with it to increase our productivity and our well-being? And that's one of them. Like, when do we schedule time for meetings, and when do we have these off times for meetings, so we actually can be able to do our focus work? And also, you and me loving Notion is probably having a space for your projects and your timeline. So who's going to do what, who's doing what now, and who's having a responsibility for each of everything that we have in this project. Like create a digital place for your projects and your way of working together.
Are there any other examples of team agreements?
Yeah, I love team agreements. So if you work in an office together, usually like having headphones. If I'm wearing headphones, that means don't disturb me. Like that could be one team agreement. So if Maria is wearing headphones, that means, okay, maybe I need to think one more time before I come to her and knock her on the shoulder and ask her what's going to eat for lunch today. And if you're working in a hybrid environment or a remote environment, then you can have team agreements regarding Slack status and Slack notifications, stuff like that. Oh, Maria is not available on Slack. What does that mean? And how much time do we have without notifications on Slack each and every day? And we're going to be different in this kind of environment. Not everyone in the team will think the same about these things, but just starting to discuss these kind of things is like, okay, that's top 1% as well. Not taking everything for granted. Just, okay, let's talk about team agreements and let's see if we can make some improvements here.
We already talked about Notion a little bit as a tool that can support kind of you being focused. Although I think with Notion also sometimes you have to use it correctly, because with Notion you can easily also get into the flow of like hyper optimizing and making it pretty. Are there any other tools that you recommend that you use, and also any Notion advice for people that you have, if you have some?
If you're starting with Notion advice, only save and use the kind of things that you want to use that helps you every single day. If in the beginning, when you're learning Notion, it's really good to like build stuff that you won't ever use. But when you got past that thing, like, okay, what do I want Notion to be and how do I want to use it? Okay, let's stick to that. You don't need to optimize anymore. We optimize way too much, spending too much time optimizing, trying to increase our efficiency and not focusing on like productivity and what's important. So that's my Notion advice. And when it comes to more tools, we already talked about focus mode on iOS. Focus mode is golden. Yeah, probably on the Mac, I would suggest trying out Raycast. Raycast is an application opener, application launcher, but it can also be a text expander, short commands. You can do a lot of things inside of Raycast. It's kind of similar to Notion, where you're like getting interested in Notion. And it's like, oh, this is some kind of rabbit hole I would dive in. And Raycast is the same thing. Okay. You can use it super broad. Wow. But it helps me a lot, because then I can have shortcuts for turning on my focus mode. I can have shortcuts for starting playing my focus music, and then like having shortcuts for opening a specific page inside of Notion. So you can have all of that happening in 1 second, and then you're ready to go. But besides apps and tools, what's probably going to help your focus the most is probably like reading a book, like consuming some kind of entertainment or knowledge that isn't YouTube, social media, and podcast. Like, how can I train and work with my focus on these not so giving activities? Like we talked about, like stimulants. It's way less stimulant to read a book than to watch a YouTube video. So that probably going to help you with your focus in the long run. And hopefully you'll find a book that you like as well.
If you were to give your marketer self from, 2-3 years ago, productivity advice, what would you say to him?
Create some clarity. Like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? What are you actually going to do? And then schedule time for that thing. Like, what am I going to do and when? Just those kind of things. And when it comes to when, like, how can I minimize my distractions? So I don't try to multitask all the time. What, when, and minimize distractions. That's the way to start.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, for sharing what you know about productivity. It's a very inspiring episode, I think. And I also feel very, very inspired to finally take action and time block the heck out of my calendar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria.